As you no doubt realize, the IRS is basic on the chain of attacks on Scientology. Without them flanking the psychs at every turn, the squirrels at every turn, the shyster lawyers at every turn, and fueling the end theta media, we would have peace. And not just in the US, but across the world. You, no matter what you are doing in Scientology, inside or out, have been part of this war. Whether fighting it on the front lines or becoming an auditor and helping to clear this planet. And being there is an experience you should never forget. Pass it on to your children and grandchildren. One final story is in order. In October of 1991, while this war was raging at its apex, Marty Rathbun and I were in Washington, D.C. to attend one of these court hearings I mentioned. It was to be the next day. We had just finished a lunch meeting, and our next appointment wasn't for a couple of hours. In other words, we had some spare time in our hands. That's not something we're accustomed to. So, we thought at least we could create a bit of mischief. We told the lawyers we'd see them in an hour or so, and that we would be down at the IRS building. Of course, they all had a good chuckle as we left the room. Off we proceeded down to 1111 Constitution Avenue, which, if you didn't know, is the address of the national headquarters of the IRS. We presented ourselves to security at the front door, signed the visitor's log, and informed them we were there to see Fred. They asked, "Fred who?" We answered, "Fred Goldberg, of course, the commissioner of the IRS." "Is he expecting you?" they asked. "No," was our response. "But if you phone him on the intercom and tell him we are from the Church of Scientology, I am sure he'd love to see us." Well, apparently, I was right. We did meet with the commissioner, and as the saying goes, the rest is history. There will be no billion-dollar tax bill which we can't pay. There will be no more discrimination. There will be no more 2,500 cases against parishioners across the U.S. The pipeline of IRS false reports won't keep flowing across the planet. There will be no more nothing, because on October the 1st, 1993, at 8:37 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the IRS issued letters recognizing Scientology and every one of its organizations as fully tax-exempt. The war is over!
The fleet was coming home after World War II. Out of Pearl Harbor steamed the mightiest armada in history. It was Aloha to Diamond Head for Admiral William F. Halsey. Final view of the world-renowned landmark that saw American sea power stricken on December 7th, 1941, where now rode the fleet that won immortal fame, avenging the Day of Infamy. Into fog-shrouded San Francisco Bay, where thousands lined the hills and piers, sailed 14 warships beneath crowd-jammed Golden Gate Bridge. To the welcomers on the famed bridge of the Golden Gate, salute from the Admiral on the bridge of a fighting ship. Americans could never forget Bull Halsey's fight from the Marshall Islands to Tokyo Bay that blasted the Japanese fleet out of the Pacific. By October 16th, 1945, home were the sailors from the wars.
The whole thing is so incredible. The whole story is so amazing, so remarkable. This is Los Angeles. This is black magic. This is the founding of NASA, of Jet Propulsion Laboratories. What isn't in this story?
The craters and mountains of our moon bear the names of giants of science, figures like Archimedes, Kepler, and Copernicus. There is also a crater honoring someone called Jack Parsons. There are some who would rather he had been forgotten. Perhaps that's why his crater is on the dark side of the moon.
One of the greatest peacetime spy dramas in the nation's history reaches its climax as Julius Rosenberg and Morton Sobel, convicted of revealing atomic secrets to the Russians, enter the federal building in New York to hear their doom. Another of the spy ring, Mrs. Ethel Rosenberg, who with her husband was convicted of actually transmitting the secrets to Russia through Soviet diplomatic channels.
In 1945, after a 4-year stint in the Navy, Hubbard became involved in ritual magic with a protege of British Satanist Aleister Crowley.
They start performing ceremonies to find a woman who'll be willing to be the mother of an incarnation of the Antichrist, Babylon. Sexual ceremonies were performed between Parsons and Cameron, with Hubbard watching and telling them what to do and observing things on the astral plane. And this was meant to, she would become pregnant and they would control this elemental destructive force. I can't emphasize this too much. Hubbard was trying to incarnate pure evil so that he could control it to his own ends.
But the church insists that Hubbard's participation in the alleged rituals was part of a government mission.
We know about L. Ron Hubbard. He was sent in by one of the American security forces with the brief to shut the thing down, which effectively he did.
Tell me about the house in Pasadena and how he advertised for people and what have you.
He had all kinds of time for people, and there were really all types of there. There were artists and authors and freelancers, photographers, and then there were the other the old timers, mostly, much of them much older, who were followers of Aleister Crowley, who was a British metaphysician or something.
And he advertised. Tell me about the ad he used to put in the paper that you didn't.
Oh well, he decided to open up. He had about a room for some vacant apartments up there, and so he converted them all. And then he had 19 apartments available, and so he put an ad in the paper says, "Must not believe in for tenants." And in those days, there was a tremendous housing shortage, and people just rushed anywhere to try anything. Anyway, he said they must not believe in God, or something like that. And it just attracted thousands of people, all of whom were insisting they were not religious and that.
And that's where you met Hubbard. Tell me about that and what he was like, what you saw made of him.
Well, he was already a reasonably well-known science fiction author, and so he was brought over there, and and I met him over there. He was a very distinguished-looking man, as you probably know, and Parsons had invited him in with great, and of course immediately Hubbard glommed on to Parsons' girlfriend. Parsons didn't believe in marriage, but he had this beautiful young lady living there who was his girlfriend, and everybody knew it. And Hubbard immediately glommed onto her, and eventually the whole place just sort of tore apart because of the big romance between he and Sarah. So things were pretty touchy there, and I think that's what led him to run out the apartments.
Dianetics was an immense success. From the moment it was published in 1950, it swept through America and other countries around the world.
This book, that's the background of all of this. That's what started all the trouble. And we expected this to sell about 6,000 copies, and it hit the top of the bestseller list of the New York Times, and it just stayed there month in, month out. It was like I started an avalanche.
Are you now, or have you ever been a communist?
I'm not now a communist.
There has been a small group within the Screen Actors Guild which has consistently opposed the policy of the Guild board and officers or the Guild itself as evidenced by the vote on various issues. That small clique has been referred to, has been discussed as more or less following the tactics that we associate with the Communist Party.
And we're back once again with David Miscavige. I'm going to let you get to the point you want to get to, but I was astonished during the break you told me you had never heard that tape before.
No, I've never heard that tape.
L. Ron Hubbard tape.
No, I'm not. I mean, it may exist there, but I haven't heard it. I mean, I don't know if you understand. There are 6,000 lectures by Mr. Hubbard. There are over 20 million words of printed words in Scientology, and all of these have been available in Scientology. So if it is there, well, fine. And I don't think anything's being hidden either. I just personally haven't heard that tape. Okay. No.
Now, you wanted to get back to the issue of the psychiatrists,
yes.
and let me, if I may, by way of introduction to that, I did not interrupt you before, but you were talking about the use of psychiatry in Nazi Germany, the use of psychiatry in the Soviet Union.
Yes.
I would argue, and I think most psychiatrists in this country would argue, that what we're talking about here was the misuse of psychiatry in both those countries.
Well, okay, and if we're talking about the misuse, fine. In any event, I think any use that ends up killing people is a misuse, and I think that's a hell of a record to have. But let me get back to where it was, because it does tie in. You say the misuse, but I don't know if you're aware that there was a plan in 1955 in this country, Ted, to repeat what was done in Russia. There was going to be a Siberia, USA set up on 1 million acres in Alaska to send mental patients. They were going to lessen the commitment laws. You could basically get into an argument with somebody and be sent up there. This sounds very odd. Nobody's ever heard about it. That's in no small part thanks to the Church of Scientology.
This is the story of a 30-year search by U.S. intelligence agencies to perfect mind control. Some of those engaged in that search have agreed to talk about it for the first time. One said, "I think every last one of us felt sorry to attempt this kind of thing. We knew we were crossing the line." The search would be endless. From brothels, an agent says, we learned a lot about human nature in the bedroom, to the mystical rites of a magical mushroom ceremony performed by an Indian shaman, to a Spanish bull ring. The bull has had electrodes implanted in the brain and is controlled by a scientist. There would be victims. One intelligence agency tried to peel this man's mind back to reveal its deepest secrets.
Lived through it. I lived through it.
This man worked on some of these programs. He would write of his work, "It was fun, fun, fun." This is the story of the search for mind control.
ABC News Close-Up, Mission Mind Control. With ABC News correspondent Paul Altmaier.
The mostest of everything describes the new giant of commercial aviation, the jetliner 747. Contrasted with great conventional aircraft, the 747 will carry 490 passengers. This is more than double current capacity. Its engines will be twice as powerful as today's airliner. An idea of the size of the engines is emphasized by two stewardesses perched on the rim of a jet. Stepping inside the cabin is like entering a small theater. Pilots, stewardesses, and a passenger or two provide realistic perspective relative to passageways and rows of seats as they conduct an inspection of this mock interior. The first of these great birds, 25 in all, at a total cost of $525 million, will be delivered by the Boeing Company to Pan American Airways in 1969.
He went off to begin a project of further research. He took with him a few very dedicated members of the religion, which became the nucleus of what we now know today as the Sea Organization. The most dedicated members of the religion are members of the Sea Organization. They dedicate their entire lives to accomplishing the goals and objectives of Scientology.
It's the people who sign a billion-year contract to come back lifetime after lifetime serving Hubbard.
On the ship, Hubbard enhanced his bridge to total freedom, creating new levels above that of clear. Hubbard acquired more ships to accommodate the Sea Organization.
In the early 60s, Hubbard was under investigation in various countries. His solution was to take to the high seas. He made himself commodore of a fleet of 3 ships, a Scientology navy. To crew the vessels, he created the Sea Organization. The members of this so-called Sea Org would become the church's clergy.
They began going from port to port in the Mediterranean. Show up for a few days and then go off, sail off in some other direction. And a very enterprising reporter for Granada television in Britain tracked him down.
Slate 1, take 1.
That's one of the very few instances where Hubbard has actually appeared on camera.
What are you actually doing on this ship now?
I am studying ancient civilizations, trying to find what happened to them, finding out why they went into a decline, why they died.
Hubbard believed that he had lived various lives in the Mediterranean area, as a Phoenician prince, as an Italian prince.
The tide of North African revolt washes over Morocco as rebelling Arabs for a time overrun the city of Casablanca, shortly after the arrival of the new French Resident General. In an orgy of destruction, whole sections of the city are set ablaze, completely overwhelming the efforts of firefighters whose only resort is the ancient bucket brigade. In 3 days of almost uncontrolled rioting, scores of vehicles are put to the torch, some with the occupants in them. Shops which had been kept closed by protesting Arab nationalists are burned and looted. As the long smoldering discontent with French rule flares, little escapes the aroused rebels. "80 persons die as rebellious Arabs attack Arabs loyal to the French, who declare martial law and rush in troops from France and other colonies to quell the uprising. Hundreds are rounded up, and prisoner compounds are filled to overflowing as France fights for North African survival."
Yeah, I was in prison when Dianetics first started. Yeah, 1950. We fought the establishment. The black Muslims were coming in with the Quran on the dark side of the moon, and the Islamic arm of the church and the Masonry. I don't know how to put the Masons involved in that. I don't want to get tripped up in with anyone else on any other level. But he come up with Dianetics 1950. So a lot of the guys were interested in studying the way to process the mind, how to clear your mind from past confusion, how to resurrect the soul and be reborn within yourself. So that's where Scientology started, and then they started selling it, and then it got to be the process. And then the Church of the Last Day, the Last Judgment, I sent some people to England. I couldn't go myself, but I sent some people there to do some certain things to make an effect, to cause an awakening of an awareness in that. No, Bruce was just one person that went in that direction. There were some other people riding motorcycles that was doing some other things, you know. No, I think if you go over them stones, you know where you got them big pile of stones over there? I think you see this mark on my forehead? Well, they got this mark over there and 2 or 3 of the stones. There was some other things doing with some stones and some reasons for... You know how the occult is. You get involved in all kinds of under darkness things that are running under nooses, that are running through just, I don't know, you know, it would take too long to explain it all, man. But yeah, you're right.
So you've got to doing with Scientology, that stuff in the process, some people said you're a Satanist.
Whatever that means, you know, God is a devil, I mean, a clever devil or whatever, you know, it opens up to wherever you go, whatever you're going to use, where are we going to survive, how's it going to go? You say, oh, I want to be all these individuals and I want to believe all these things, but then the wind blows in another direction and you say, whoa, that hurts too much, I got to change my mind about something, you know, because like when it comes down and we go down in the basement and you're laying up on the rack, you're going to do whatever the king tells you to do. It's that simple, man.
The animosity culminated in Portugal in 1975.
A whole bunch of people were in the streets, and someone got them all hyped up, and they filled up a bunch of taxis with rocks, and they went down to the Apollo, and they started stoning the ship. It was a time of incredible upheaval and upset, and people in the streets, and this rumor went around. It went like wildfire. Pretty soon you're seeing on walls in the harbors, Apollo equals CIA, Apollo equals CIA. Frankly, we all thought it was pretty amusing. Like, the last people in the world to be accused of the CIA, being the CIA is the Church of Scientology. We had been in a pitched battle with the CIA since 1950.
Whatever you're told, whatever needs to be done, If it's against the law, it doesn't matter.
The best example was in the mid-70s, Scientologists were walking into these Department of Justice offices and IRS offices and taking documents out by the yard. The FBI raided the Church of Scientology, the largest raid in FBI history at that time.
Oh my God, the building is filled with FBI and they're taking things. It was craziness.
Clearly, L. Ron Hubbard was in charge of all of that, but he was only named an unindicted co-conspirator.
We are all under siege from the actions of violent criminals. More police, more prisons, and longer sentences are not helping. Over the last 3 decades, prison populations have increased by 500%. Inmates grow more dangerous and better educated to a life of crime. Whether warehoused in overcrowded cell blocks or forcibly drugged to keep them quiet and under control, the idea of criminal rehabilitation has been all but lost. So it is that for every 10 released, 7 go on to commit another assault, another robbery, or worse.